Hello.
Hello. How are you?
I'm really good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you. I'm great.
Wonderful. Who do I have the honor and the pleasure of chatting with?
I'm Andy.
Andy. Okay. And Andy, what do you call your most inspiring desire in life?
My most inspiring desire in life. Um, Big question, but I think it's to get people to see the world in a new way, or just think things they've never thought before from reading my writing.
Okay. Okay. I like that answer.
Yeah.
What type of writing do you do? Because clearly I have no idea who you are. And that's,
Yeah.
again, the purpose of this little crazy podcast. But yeah, I mean, what do you write?
I write thrillers, actually. So it's not like I'm out here writing philosophy or nonfiction or self-help or something. But I write thrillers, and I have three that are out now. And they are quickly overviews. The Lost Night is my debut. It's a murder mystery set in a sort of the warehouse parties of dirty circa 2009 hipster Brooklyn. The Herd is my sophomore thriller, and it is a thriller that's set in an elite, bougie, exclusive, all-female co-working space. Remember co-working spaces? And then my latest that came out a couple of months ago is called We Were Never Here. It's about two globe-trotting best friends who kill a backpacker in self-defense on their vacation. And I'm very excited to say that this one was a Reese's Book Club pick, and because of that, basically a New York Times bestseller. So it's been really an honor to have it finding its way into lots of hands.
Do you know what? I've seen some of those books in Barnes and Nobles.
Amazing.
I love books. I love Barnes and Nobles. I love anything to do with books.
Same.
My uncle, a couple of years back, said to me, because I write as well, which maybe you know. My uncle sent me a little handwritten note I'd given to him when I was like 9 years old, telling him that I wanted to be a writer when I grew up.
Oh,
And yeah, so I know what it's like to write. And as you were showing me your covers and your books, I was getting goosebumps. Because it's such a beautiful thing to be able to kind of like take your creativity and share it with the world. So how did you get, what was your journey to your first book, right?
Yeah, it's a great question. I too, when I was little, said that I was going to be an author someday. That was like what I wrote in the, what I will be when I grow up, dash. I would fill in writer. And then in college, I discovered magazine journalism, and I completely forgot about that whole author thing. I wanted to work in magazines. And so I did that. I worked in different magazines at Condé Nast and Hearst, all over New York City. And they just kept, it was sort of like the Indiana Jones thing, where like, as soon as you jump off of a, rock, it explodes behind you or whatever. And so they kept folding while I was there, and I kept getting laid off. And then I would dust myself off and go to the next, get another job and go to the next magazine. And I still loved it, but it was clearly sort of a waning field. And so while I was at what turned out to be my last full-time editorial role, obviously I didn't know that at the time, I decided I wanted to start just kind of on a whim working on a fiction manuscript, so that I would have something that, I couldn't just walk into work one day and it was taken away. It would really be mine. And so back in 2014, I signed up for NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month, which is going on now. And I vowed to write 50,000 words in a month. Which is about half of one of my books. It's a lot of words. And I let them be bad, and I just followed this idea I have of, what if after one of those crazy warehouse parties, there was a dead body, And I just started with that hook and I wrote 50,000 words. And it kind of tricked me into thinking like, oh, now you're far enough in that you have to keep going, even though in reality, I was on step one of about 3,000. But to try to make a long story slightly shorter. So I just kept working on that. I finished a draft. I did revisions on my own. I gave it to, beta readers. I let other people who I trusted read it and give me notes, and I did revisions. And then with that, when I thought it was in really good shape, which was a few years after I had first started writing, I queried literary agents, and a few offered to represent me, and I signed with one, and she sold it. Again, to make a long story short, after a few stumbling blocks, she got us an offer for a book deal at Random House, and I have been working with the same editor there ever since. So there were a lot of moments of doubt and setbacks and question marks, but this is what I'm doing full time. And what I didn't mention is that last magazine also folded while I was there. And that just sort of made me redouble my efforts in focusing on books. And now that I'm here, it's sort of like the little kid inside me is like, this is what you wanted to do. Like, that magazine stuff was great. It was a great diversion, but here we are.
Most people have a dream, right? And yet they don't actually do the work to make that dream come true. And it's always a lovely moment to kind of connect with someone who has had that dream and made that dream a reality. And what would you say to the people that have a dream, but just can't make that dream come true for whatever reason, right?
Yeah.
What would you say to them? How would you inspire them to make their dream a reality?
Yeah. Something I find myself, reminding writers of a lot, people especially who want to be in my position, is that when you see people who look like they have success, who look like they are where you want to go, you are only seeing the tippy top of the iceberg of what went into that. And so it's very easy to sort of tell yourself, well, they got there because they're better than me. They got there because they're more talented. They got there for things that are out of my control. And the reality is, it's a million steps. And of course, I say all this as a privileged white woman. And of course, privilege plays a very large role in, materialistic success of the climbing this path that I'm on. I absolutely acknowledge that. I don't mean to take away from that. But, you don't see all the times that they had doubt or that they thought they couldn't push on. And for me, the attitude has always been, I am going to write books until they whip away my keyboard, and then I will write by pen. And then if they take that away from me, then I will find, a rock that leaves some kind of sediment, and I will scratch out stories. So I think, be kind to yourself if you feel like you're not where you want to be, or this dream feels out of reach. But then I think it's really beneficial to sort of look at people who have reached what you see as success and learn about them and learn about all the steps that got them there. Go online and read them talking about their process, the setbacks, really in all creative fields. Like, there's so much rejection and failure and times that people could have given up. And I think comparing yourself to this sort of idealized version of how it should have gone, or the only, this is the only way it happens and it won't happen for me, is so demoralizing. And the reality is, it's hard for everyone. And there's just tons of work that goes on behind the scenes, and reading about how other people tackled it really might motivate you to, set a smaller goal, get a new idea for how you can, start to chip away at that goal. How can you break it down into smaller steps that will bring you closer to achieving it, instead of just feeling like it's this Herculean thing that others have done that you could never never do. I think part of the reason that I started working on a book is that I had some friends who sold books, and suddenly it was like, bing, that's a thing I can do. right? It's like when a runner first, beat the 5-minute mile and suddenly everyone went, oh, that's a thing we can do. And then a ton more people were beating the 5-minute mile afterward. So just kind of educating yourself, being kind to yourself, and looking at it as a very long process. And how can you sort of start to move forward instead of it being this one possible insurmountable mountain.
Indeed. And I would say that I think many people who have succeeded, let's say, specifically in the creative world, which clearly you're in, I would say that they, and I can talk for myself here as well, I would say that they haven't lost touch with their inner kid. They are still in touch with their childhood imagination. Yeah. They are still in touch with their childhood dreams. And it's like there's two versions. Like for me, there's two versions of Leon. There's the adult Leon, and then there's the kid Leon. And, the kid Leon is the one that creates all the magic. And I would go so far as to say that that's pretty much, I would imagine, what happens with you as well, right? Where like it's the creativity, that place of magicness comes from within your kid.
Yeah. Having this sort of rich, I love that way of putting it. And I think having this sort of rich nurturing of your childhood self and that way of seeing the world and that curiosity and that wonder and that sort of excitement and interest and just like need to engage with the world via arts is something that it takes cultivation and it takes celebrating. And, obviously, and I think you'd agree with this, it's not the only part that it takes to succeed in these fields, because then we need adult Leon who's, putting in the work, making those calls, doing the networking, all that other stuff. But I think, it's creative businesses are tough in a lot of ways. Like I said, there's so much rejection. And if you don't have that sort of inner joy that you're bringing to this act of creation, I don't know how you would keep going. Like there has to be some intrinsic reward to putting in the work and to really appreciating and celebrating the fun part of what you're doing to reach these goals and to create something you're proud of.
Yeah, and I've always wondered when it comes to writers that go down the fiction road. Yeah. So, you and I have known each other for about 15 minutes, but I can sense that there's a lot of stories, right? Inside you. You have, as all human beings do, you have a story that I'm sure is compelling. So my question to you is, why did you choose to go down the fiction road and not to kind of go down the nonfiction road?
Mm-hmm. It's a great question. I think for me, the sort of bravery element is a big reason for it. And what I mean is there's a lot of myself in all of my books. I think, most fiction is autobiographical in some way. And I tend to write about, working women in my age range living in New York City. So a lot of their thoughts probably are my thoughts, and a good amount of their experiences are my experiences, minus all the stuff about dead bodies. But even on that note, a lot of their fears, my thrillers are based on these very real fears that I'm sort of exploring in the form of a story. I think for me, fiction felt like a safer way to kind of wrestle with some of my own feelings and some feelings that we don't like to address. I write about, female shame, and I write about comparison and jealousy and envy and internalized sexism and all this stuff that's sort of like the ugly things I don't like to write about. And I think especially when I started writing fiction, like I said, it was 2014. So that's, 7 years ago. So I was squarely in my 20s. I think I had this sort of idea that if I was writing about myself, that was indulgent or it didn't matter. Whatever I had to say about myself was not relevant, because who am I? And so instead, weaving stuff into a story that other people could enjoy and that's also entertainment felt safer. And it's been interesting because I write these books, and then around publication time, I have to do some sort of publicity for it. And that includes pitching essays and sort of first person pieces that talk about, the inspiration for the books, the themes I was trying to explore. They sort of give some backstory and context to what I personally was bringing to these books. And it's theoretically a way to drum up some PR. But doing it was actually really cathartic. And I think over the years, talking about the books, talking about what I was bringing to these books, talking about these sort of themes that are not super likable, they're not super comfortable to talk about, like shame or sexism, has given me more confidence to do some of that first person writing and to feel like, okay, I'm not the voice of the generation or anything like that, but like I have something to say that might resonate with people. And like I said at the top of the hour, that might like get them to think about things in a new way or reconsider some of their own feelings or thoughts. So I think for me, it feels a little safer and a little maybe neutered that I can explore some of this stuff in fiction. And then also, I just wanted to write books that people would read. And I love reading thrillers. It's my favorite genre. And so setting out with the goal of just writing a page turner that somebody couldn't put down, that people would love to pick up and fly through. And then, they'd get some feminism and some big questions and discussion topics, woven in there very subtly. That was exciting to me as well. I could kind of Trojan horse some thoughts I have about, especially women in the world.
You mentioned the word cathartic and how writing is cathartic for you. Mm-hmm. I've spent many hours on a therapist's couch, not as the therapist, mind you. And I've also spent many hours journaling. Mm-hmm. And I would journal. I started journaling at my late teens, I'd say. And this was before any of the books. And I realized how cathartic it was to be able to like just let it all out. Yeah. No one was going to read it. No one was going to shame it. I was just going to let it out.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you can relate to what I'm about to say, but I remember the first time I ever wrote a blog post and posted it live. I was a nervous wreck because I was like, oh my goodness, no one ultimately cared that I was writing this blog post, but this was happening inside me. I was like, oh my goodness, what about if people don't like what I'm saying? What about if I get hate mail? What about if my family gets upset with me? What about? And I was wondering whether you had that kind of similar experience when it came to like finally putting your work out there. And you had the cathartic experience of kind of writing as a kid and as a young adult, but no one ever read it. Right. Like, what was that moment like for you when you were like, oh no, people are actually going to read what I wrote and what is about to happen?
Yeah. I mean, it was terrifying. I was petrified. You put up this blog post, but the blog post, nobody was paid to review it and let you know what they thought of it. And that's kind of what happens with books. You write this book, and every step of the way, it was like going, okay, I got the agent signed on, wanted to represent it. That's a good sign. She got us a book deal. Okay, this person that seems smart likes it too. That's great. But then once they start printing out these advanced copies, they send it to reviewers, and reviewers are paid to say if it's good or not. That was absolutely petrifying because this is the work of my heart. And again, I don't know how memoir writers do it. It's scary enough when it's fiction and it's about a character I made up and not entirely about me. But it was really scary. And the reviews, I think it's something where I've gotten a little bit more inoculated and my skin has gotten a little bit thicker as more books have come out, and just in the aggregate more, there's, you start to realize there's going to be one bad professional review for every 4 or 5 good ones, and that's fine. And you'll continue to be able to write. And it feels I'm getting a little more used to it. But at the same time, I don't want to not be sensitive because I think my sensitivity is a strength and the reason that I am. a full-time storyteller, which is maybe something you can relate to as well as a full-time creative. So it's really scary. And I guess what I would say is if you or anyone out there who consumes creative content in any form, movies or songs or books or anything, I beg you, learn the difference between it's not for me and it's awful, because somebody somewhere was putting their heart and soul into it, even if it felt completely flat for you. And that's just something I remind myself is, people like to put things down because it gives them sort of a sense of power or superiority. Here's how I would have done this book better or differently. Well, okay, you haven't written any books, but fine. And I just remind myself it's not personal. It's not about me. It's one opinion of many, and there's no book that will be for everyone. And so actually, if I'm writing books that get people riled up, and some people love it and some people hate it, that's actually more what I'm trying to do than to write something right in that wet noodle middle of the road where everyone goes, meh.
And you touched on vulnerability. And I would say that, and I think I speak for you, that when you write down your heart and you write down your soul and you let out your inner creative genius, you are ultimately being the most vulnerable that you can be. And you are putting it out to the whole world. And in doing that, you run the risk of, as you just said, someone turning around and saying, well, what a pile of rubbish you've just created. All right. And most people don't even want to go anywhere near that, because they are sensitive. And by opening up their own vulnerability, we open ourselves up to be squashed. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yet you could never be the person that you are and the author that you are and the creative that you are unless you are willing to be squashed. Right?
No, absolutely. I think I'm going to get the quote very wrong, but Brene Brown has a comment has a great quote about, don't let yourself be taken down by someone who's not even in the ring. Here they are looking at you, jeering at you, saying what you did wrong, and they're not putting anything out. So who's the brave one here? Who's the one persevering and being vulnerable and putting in the time and pouring their heart into something? And if that's you, then that's a consequence is that other people who aren't even in the ring are going to try to take you down or insult it. And there's a lot of reasons for it, and really none of them have to do with you.
Yes, indeed. Indeed. How did you kind of I know you talked earlier about the way that you made the decision to start writing. Yeah. But how did you kind of hold your heart, hold your vulnerability, hold that kid for long enough to be able to go out into the world and do what you do? Because many of us get squashed so viciously that we just kind of give up and our sensitivity is turned against us. What did you do to kind of keep the magic inside you alive? I think that's a really, I don't know. I mean, I think that's a really important question.
I think it's a really important question, and I'll answer it, but then I would love to hear your answer as well, because I think it's such a challenge, and it's something we're all trying to do, I think, in different ways for our passions. And for me, I think the secret, there's sort of a micro answer and a macro answer. So I'll start with the micro one. And the micro one is whatever stage of the process I'm in, I pretend that no other stage exists. So when I start drafting a new book, I completely forget, I willfully cast out of my mind the idea that there will later be readers, that I will later have to do a revision, that I will later have to, do publicity and marketing around a book. None of that exists. And all that exists is this Word document, actually Google Doc, that I am just typing into for 6 months. And I need to tell myself that, because if I start to imagine at that stage, if I start to thinking about other people reading it, even my early readers, I get very self-conscious and I start to, just question. I can really spin out, right? Of like, I'm going in the wrong direction. This character is not likable. This plot point is really ham-fisted. I can really get self-conscious with everything that I know is wrong with it. Of course, there's tons wrong with it. It's a first draft. So I really focus on that. And then it's like every step that I move to, okay, now I have notes from my beta readers. Okay, now I have, major revision notes from the editor, the one I really have to impress. Every step, I just really stay hyper-focused on like, this is the task at hand. And I'm just putting off that idea that eventually people are going to read it, hopefully, that it's going to be out in the world. And so I really don't deal with that until the ARCs, the advanced reader copies, are printed and they're starting to go out. And even then I can switch my mentality and go, well, I can't change the book now. And I give myself this pep talk of, well, your editor liked it, your agent liked it, her sales team liked it, your beta readers liked it. They're all smart people. And now it exists. So there's nothing that can be done except focusing on the next stage, which is, getting the ARCs into the right hands and this and that, and getting excited about it. So, while I'm working on it, I really just try to like put myself in a cocoon of like, this is what needs to be done right now. And that stage can be dealt with when I am at that stage. It's sort of like the Buddhist idea, now that I think about it, of like, just be mindful in the task at hand and don't worry about what has already happened and don't worry about what's coming in the future. So that's kind of the micro answer. And then the macro answer, and this is maybe a little different from what you asked, but I think it's really relevant here. So my second book, The Herd, I was so excited about this book. It had great reviews. It had a lot of like excitement and buzz. It was in print, in some magazines recommended. And its publication date was March 24th, 2020. Think about that. Think about what was going on in the end of March 2020.
Yeah.
So it seemed like it was so promising and it was really going to break out. And then, complete crickets. It just totally fell flat because the timing was awful. And, I had this 6-city book tour that I had spent months working on and planning, canceled at the last minute. Everyone stayed home. People who ordered their books, who tried to order a copy, didn't even get it because it was just such a, everything was a nightmare then. And it was horrible. And people kept saying, well, what are you doing? How are you dealing with this? And I said, I'm writing the next one. I was in the middle of those early days of the pandemic. I was madly working on the next one. I had an April 30th, 2020 due date. And for me, the only sort of way I could comfort myself was, I'm just going to keep writing. I have a million ideas. No one book will make or break my career. And I'm just on to the next one. Maybe the next one will be the breakout. And then, beautiful story that we can't all count on. Reese Witherspoon read it and liked it. And this totally miraculous seeming thing happened this summer when it did come out. But I know people, I have friends who debuted around the same time as me in 2019, and they're still kind of stumbling with that second book to finish it because the first didn't sell that well. And I understand it. I really understand that feeling of like being scared to try again. It didn't work out the first time. What if this one gets an even worse reception? I get that. But for me, the way to keep going is to keep going. It sounds silly when I put it that way, but you can really weather the ups and the downs. Even after this book, even after We Were Never Here, which did so well, I am hard at work on the next book. Yes, I'm terrified, the readers won't like it as much, or it'll do worse, or who knows, but like the only way that I can keep cool through all of this is to just, there's always another book. I have a million ideas. My career will be long. And this is how I sort of stay steady in this field that for no reason, one book flopped. Maybe a little reason, but like, the difference in sales, The Herd and We Were Never Here are not that dramatically different in quality. And yet, of course, the sales have been totally different. So I just need to keep writing good books. And that's the part that I can control.
Yeah. And you said you need to keep going. And really, I'm not the first and I won't be the last person that says this, right? But that in many respects is half the battle. You just need to keep going.
Truly.
For me personally, over the past few years, it's been tough. There's been some stuff going on, and I've just kept going. I felt like I've been treading water, but I've just been treading water, and that's fine. I've just kept going. Could I have created a lot more had I not been going through what I'm going through? Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Could I have given up? Yeah, I could have. But, maybe it's not some of my best work, but as you said, just going to keep going. Never going to stop. One day, maybe Reese Witherspoon will read one of my books. I'm going to tell you a little secret, actually, which I haven't shared. I've always been like, because I did the Kindness Diaries, which was on Netflix, the show. And I was always like, why isn't Lady Gaga watching the Kindness Diaries and telling all her fans about the Kindness Diaries?
Yes.
Right? I'm like, can you just not watch the Kindness Diaries, please? Right? And, maybe she has watched it. Maybe she hasn't watched it. Who knows? But I'll keep going. You'll keep going.
Yeah.
And maybe that's what differentiates us from people who have creativity and don't dedicate their lives to it. I don't know. I mean, of course, there are other reasons as well, right? But you've got to get in touch with your inner magnificence. You've got to keep going. You've got to have a little bit of luck. And you've got to keep going. And who knows where it ends up, right?
Yeah.
I mean, sorry, go on.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you hit on, Kindness Diaries. You hit on something too with you're treading water right now, and that's okay. And that just makes me think about self-kindness and how self-kindness is such a key part of succeeding in a creative field or any kind of creating. It's so easy to get down on yourself, to be so hard on yourself. We have this whole grind culture. And so it's, really easy to, oh my God, I don't have much output this month. My output is my worth. I suck because I am not creating at the level that I want to be creating, or I am not creating at the level that person is creating that I admire, or whatever it is. And it's really easy to lose the self-kindness piece. And it can just sort of destroy you from the inside if you don't have that. If you can find that balance of, I'm going to keep going, so I'm going to keep creating, and I'm going to be kind to myself. So not too kind where you just give up on the whole thing and I don't really need to do it. But some balance of, I'm going to keep working because it's important to me, but I'm also going to be kind about the fact that I'm not where I want to be, or not, producing the quality or amount that I would like. I think that's key. And that's just something I'm constantly reminding myself of, and, trying not to get too mean to myself or comparing myself too much to other people, even good friends, who are authors, and just reminding myself, okay, I can be happy for them and jealous of them. And that's all fine. It's fine. It's fine. Whatever state that I'm in right now, whether I'm hugely productive and loving my work or anywhere else on the spectrum, is okay.
Yes, it is indeed. So when you're writing and you're in that zone, assuming the most productive zone, right, where you're fully connected to source, to your creativity, to nature, to whatever you want to call it, how do you get yourself into that zone of magnificence, where what is coming out of you is not actually from you, right? Yeah. Where it's kind of being channeled. Like sometimes I write poetry, and I write this poetry and I'm like, what just happened? Yeah. Where on earth did that come from? Because I can guarantee you it didn't come from me. So how do you get yourself into that like funnel of magnificence, let's call it?
Yeah. I love that, into that kind of flow state.
Yes.
And that connection. So a few things. When I sit down to write, I like to have a little ritual that starts it. I wish I had the discipline to sit and actually meditate or do something like that. but I don't. So instead, I have a candle. I don't have it here now because I'm not in writing mode right now, but I have a candle that sits on my desk, and I have a lighter next to it. And I take a moment and I light the candle, and that signifies like now is writing time. And so just that moment of it, I try to, kind of tap in and be mindful. I think being mindful and present is a huge amount of, is a huge help for getting yourself, opening yourself to that sort of flow state. And then the other answer, and this is much more practical and less romantic, is I think you can sort of mimic the act of what you want to be doing, and then the inspiration will come in, right? So I'm not the first to make this observation, but we have this idea that there's inspiration and there's doing the work, and that you have to start with inspiration. And then if you start doing it, then that'll get you going. That'll make the work happen. And in reality, it's a circle. And we all know this because once you start doing something, then you kind of get into it, right? So actually doing something feeds back into inspiration. Now I'm loving this. And so for me, I will start on the work side of things and let the inspiration come. And what that looks like is that I use what's called the Pomodoro method. And it is 20 minutes of distraction-free work, in my case, writing, followed by either a 5 or 10-minute break. Repeat until I hit, for me, my word count goal. I have to write 700 words today or whatever. And so I hit start. I make sure my phone is on do not disturb. Better yet, it's in another room. I turn on do not disturb on my laptop, so I'm not getting texts in the corner or anything like that. And then I start the timer, and I sometimes am able to jump right into the manuscript and start writing, but often I also have a separate document that's called Free Writing For, and whatever the book is called, Free Writing For We Were Never Here. And it's essentially, I guess, a diary, because I'll date an entry and I'll write, just whatever stream of consciousness is in my head, free writing. I am so stuck on the scene. I have no idea how to get out of this. Everything I don't feel like writing today. I want to be doing anything else, blah, 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 blah. Get that out while the timer is running. That still counts. And then sort of miraculously, you're sitting there and you're typing, and your brain is like, oh, it's typing time. Oh, this is when we create things. And inevitably some idea pops out, and I can move over to the document that has the draft, and I can just start writing. And sometimes the 20-minute timer goes off and I don't even feel like stopping because I'm so immersed in a scene, and then I'll just keep going. And sometimes the whole 20 minutes is sort of miserable. And so I do take the break, and then I try again the next time. And, some days there's really just, for whatever reason, it's not going to happen and it's going to feel like a climb. But I think, it sounds kind of dumb again, that the only way to do it is to do it. But there's something about, taking a moment, distraction free, some little symbol like lighting a candle, or, maybe taking 3 deep breaths or something like that, to just sort of drop in and sit and tell your whole body and mind and spirit, this is writing time. And then just start moving your fingers and see what comes out. And I, even on the days that I think that nothing is going to happen today, sometimes that's when inspiration really does strike.
It's cool how each creative, whether they're writers or whatever they are, has a different system. Yeah. My system is basically, I sit by my computer, I tap into my mood, and then I put a song on repeat.
Okay.
And I literally start writing, and I get into like a meditative state.
Yeah.
Based on where that song is taking me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that gets me into that zone. And if I'm in the zone, whether it's hosting, whether it's writing, whatever it may be, that's when I work the best.
Yeah.
I get into my heart, things slow down, and I get into like a trance. Yeah.
Yeah.
And hopefully some magic comes out. So I've got one last question for you.
Sure.
And that question is, if the 8-year-old you, okay, met you now, what would they be feeling? What would they say? How would they look up to you? Would they be proud? What would they do? Because that 8-year-old is with you anyway, right? She's here right now. Yeah.
Right.
But kind of what would their essence be looking up to you and being like, I don't want to put words into your mouth, but like, holy wow, you actually did it. Thank you. What would they do?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's so hard or almost uncomfortable for me to give myself those moments of real sort of self-praise. I'm getting better at self-kindness, but to really be like, heck yeah, is still, and sort of celebrate accomplishments is still a tough thing. And, I think part of that is because even that 8-year-old was in this very, emotionally stiff upper-lipped Midwestern conservative Lutheran household that really sort of trafficked in guilt as a total norm, and don't get cocky and don't stick your head up and don't think you're better than anyone else kind of attitude, which of course I think humility and kindness towards others is super important, but now as an adult, I see how that really just made it hard for me to ever see myself as good enough or celebrate my accomplishments or really, take a win. But if I am being honest, I think that 8-year-old would be pretty impressed. I think, my life on the whole is really awesome. And that is thanks to, again, a huge stew of privilege and hard work and putting in the time, loving what I do, putting, passion and vulnerability and bravery all out there. So I think the 8-year-old would be very impressed about the books, about my life here in Brooklyn. She'd probably be quite surprised that I am in a relationship with a woman. That was probably a wild card for her. I think she was envisioning, a smaller life kind of still in the Midwest, with no hate towards the Midwest. Obviously, I love it all. But yeah, I think things look different than probably what she was seeing, but that's just because I couldn't, at that age, my world was a lot smaller. And so it makes me proud and happy that my life now is probably something she couldn't even have pictured or put onto that, vision board or filled in the questionnaire of what she thought life would look like.
I think that 8-year-old would say that you were her hero. That's what I think. Okay. So keep on doing what you're doing. Keep on being magnificent. Keep on creating. And next time I go to Barnes and Nobles, I will buy every single book on the shelf that belongs to you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Truly. Thank you.
No worries. It was a real pleasure. And thank you for playing along and coming onto the podcast and being like, who on earth is this man who wants to have a chat with me and he doesn't even know who I am? But really, that's the beauty of it, right? I mean, it's easy to do a podcast where I've done my research on you. What's the point of that?
Yeah.
The whole point of this is to kind of connect and see where it goes. Yeah.
Right.
And for my kids, and for my kid to kind of, make a new friend in your kid. Yeah. And it's a beautiful thing. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much for having me. And for all of the just kindness that you exude. It's really special.
No worries. Thanks so much. Hello, everyone. It's Leon here, AKA the Kindness Guy. If you like my videos, which I hope you do, don't forget to press the subscribe button and also to ring the little bell so that the notifications notify you that I have a new video out in the world.